All right. So, chapter 5, titled The Anatomy of Power, Systems Analysis of the Japanese Diet. So, Japanese diet, so in Japan they call their parliament diet, so it's in Japanese. So, in Japanese language, the diet is the parliament. So, we're going to look at the diet or the Japanese parliament. Now, before we start, when you want to go into reading this chapter here, the chapter sort of explains the parliamentary process, how they maneuver parliamentary politics in terms of passing the bills or debating the budget, how many houses are there in the parliament, so they have like upper house, lower house. Papua New Guinea is what is called a unicameral system, and there's only one house. In a bicameral system like that of Japan and the United States, they have two houses. So we're going to look at discussion will be focused on these various dynamics of Japanese diet, the Japanese parliament. But why is parliament or diet important? Diet is important or parliament is important because it captures the essence of what ideals and values of a representative democracy is. So people's wishes are translated on the floor of parliament. So this is how political power works. During election, we transfer our political power given to us by the Constitution. We transfer this political power onto our representatives. And they carry that political power into the parliament. So parliament is the building where the political power is negotiated and exchanged. And they pass laws, they pass budget, they debate on issues that is important to us. So in that way, parliament diet is a building, not just a building, but a significant place where there is exchange of this notion of political power. But what gives this idea, or what gives the parliament, the legislature, its power? It's the Constitution, and Papua New Guinea is similar. So, for example, in Japan, the Constitution status, Article number 41. So it states that the highest organ of the state power, remember the highest organ of the state power, that's the state power, and the law-making origin of the state. So Article 41 states that all power of the state is vested in the diet. And that's similar to Papua New Guinea as well. This is an important disclaimer here. The Constitution gave its blessing on the legislature. All right. Okay, so we have the Japanese diet. Now we look at the mechanics behind the legislature. All right. So in this chapter here, and I've talked about it in chapter 4. So now we have, so chapter 1 and chapter 2, we are looking at the lens of transfer of political power. Chapter 3 and chapter 4 we are looking at the notion of big government versus the small government. So have that in mind. So Kuzumi's reform, Habe's reform in chapter 4 talks about shrinking the size of the government. So the problems of 1955 system is attributed to the government being too large, too big. And most of the indicators pointed out that there is a need for a reconstruction, or there is a need for reducing the size of the government. Now, in chapter 5, you would see these two notions here. There are some politicians that are advocating for big government, and there are some politicians that are advocating for a small government. But after 1994, the successive prime minister that came in have all advocated for the government to be reduced. When a government is reduced, that means the power of the executive is now consolidated in the executive through the prime minister. And I am guessing in Papua New Guinea, James Marape, our prime minister, is on that idea of reducing the size of the government. An indication would be, Governor Beden has recently, in the parliament, have highlighted that the prime minister's office has received large sums or received the biggest cut in the budget. Now, why is that? I believe that is an indication of the prime minister's office making an attempt to reduce the size of the government in Papua New Guinea. But here in Parliament, we will see how that idea of the clash between the ideas of big government and small government come into play in the legislature. All right, so first, please, when you come in, make sure the door is not shut out like that because it's disturbing. Next time. All right, the dynamics here. The idea is that for the parliament, so the two different issues. So when a prime minister comes in, he will decide whether the parliament runs on this idea of big government, or the parliament or the legislature runs on this idea of small government. The idea of small government is that the prime minister would have to take control of the legislature. The idea of the big government is that the prime minister would be flexible in terms of allowing his legislature to be, you can say, or to be flexible. The idea of small government is for the legislature to act as a stamp of authority. Just like what we've been experiencing in Papua New Guinea. Prime Minister knows that he controls the DSIP, PSIP, and what he does is to reduce debate and parliamentary or question time. He just bulldoze, or you can say bulldoze, or put in bills, fast track the legislature so that, question time. The beauty of our parliamentary system here is that the question time is an opportunity for our members of parliament to question the authority of the prime minister. That is why you will see that in parliament, the ministers are not allowed to ask questions. So if you are thinking that what is that lady's name, member for Medellin, what is it, Minister for Labor, Kesi Sawaga. There has been complaint recently that she is not vocal on the floor of parliament. So when you're a minister and executive, you don't ask questions or you don't stand up and debate issues on the floor of parliament. That is the nature of our representative democracy. So if you have the idea that she should be vocal on the floor of parliament, then that's wrong. She is a minister, so ministers are not allowed to ask questions. They are like the Prime Minister, only there to answer questions from the legislature. All right, get that in, so that when you go to your people, then explain to your people that Casey Sawong is not supposed to be vocal in Parliament because she is a minister, a part of the executive government on the floor of Parliament. Okay, anyways, I might waste my time talking about PNG politics. Let's get back here. All right. So first is the idea to reduce the bureaucracy. So there is a shift from bureaucracy-led politician to Prime Minister-led politician. So under the 1955 system, there is a bureaucracy-led government. When a bureaucracy-led government, that signifies a big government. All right? So the Prime Minister is under pressure to respond to the bureaucracy and other factors of the LDP. Now, when the Prime Minister is occupied with that, he is not independent enough to make independent decision for the country. His decision is being influenced by the bureaucracy. Secondly, the dominance. So the LDP party, well, after 1993, LDP party came back and remains a constant operating force in the legislature. Okay, we will see how LDP party tends to navigate, adapt within the Japanese legislature or the Diet. And then number 3, patches. 1994 to 2000 electoral reforms intended to create a two-party system resulted in a one-party plus several system. So the electoral system was supposed to create a two-party system. However, it did not. LDP came back. So now we have the dominant again from the LDP party plus opposition plus several smaller parties. So the reason being that there is under the new system also the opposition party were not visible enough. All right, and that led to the dominance again by the LDP. Okay, so let's look at the structure or the other way. Okay, imagine a computer. Computer is the diet or your laptop, and in order for your laptop to operate, you need the hardware. Okay, hardware in place so that it will operate the software, and then you access the computer. Imagine the diet and the parliament as the overall laptop, and the hardware to operate the diet is the various houses, all right, bicameral system. The hardware in our country is a unicameral system that composed of the government and the opposition in the legislature. In Japan, you have the House of Shugin and the House of Shangin, all right, or the House of Representatives and the House of Councillors. So the sizes in 2007, there are about 465 members that belong to the House of Representatives. The term in which this House of Representatives serve is 4 years. And the power in which the House of Representatives holds overrides the upper house or the House of Councillors. All right? So this is important. So now you have the upper house and the lower house. Remember that the lower house holds significant power. So their power overrides issues on the budget or various treaties or PM designation, that means appointment of the Prime Minister, and overall capability. Now switch over to the House of Councillors. You have about 240 members, the size of it. So the House of Councillors is small, and their fixed term is 6 years. So House of Councillors, like the United States, you have the House of Senate and House of, Representatives or Councillors? or Congress. Okay, Congress. So the Senate is the equivalent to the House of Councillors in Japan. We do not have that. Okay, we have this is a bicameral system. We have a unicameral system. So the purpose of the House of Councillors is only for checks and balance. So they cannot be dissolved, and the ability to, so House of Councillors act also as an accountability measure to check on the power of the House of Representatives, and vice versa. If we are going to build some sort of unique bicameral system in Papua New Guinea, we would have like the lower house would be the electorates and the upper house would be the governors, something like that. All right? But that's just food for thought. All right. Now, why is this important? Because the upper house and the lower house tend to be influential in matters of important legislation such as budget or treaties or even appointment or issues on the floor of the legislature or the diet or the parliament. So you have here, so by 1989 there was an incidence of gridlock, okay, parliamentary gridlock. So you have here, we have 1, 2, and 3. This is an indication of the parliamentary gridlock in during the period from 1989 to 2012. Now, why is this important? They call it the twisted diet, where you have the lower house trying to stop a particular bill or budget, and the upper house trying to support a particular bill or budget, and vice versa. So a sort of what is called a legislative paralysis. So the opposition tend to, because opposition is small in number, tend to LDP, the opposition is fragmented. So what the opposition do is they try to stop legislation by the LDP in terms of budget and other important treaties. So the opposition uses what is called the veto power to force compromise or deadlock. In the United States now, if you read, okay, the House of Senate and House of Congress are fighting each other, okay, over the president's immigration policy. So when it's called a gridlock, it means that the parliament has not made any decisions on a particular issue. What happens if it's come to, let's say, budget? A gridlock in a budget is serious for a country. So a gridlock in Japan can take several months. And when it takes about several months, the issue is that vital government services are not delivered on time. And that's the danger of having a bicameral system. But it's an important part of the representative democracy, because accountability, checks and balance is important. When a parliament does not have any accountability measure, then the executive can usurp power, and that's dangerous. But here, the issue is that the twisted budget or diet tend to affect the flow of the legislature. All right? So the system here, the Westminster system that was introduced, and Japan followed it, United States followed it, was designed for alternation. Okay, alternation, meaning that there should be opportunity between the upper house and lower house, alternate between policies, okay, and legislation. But currently in Japan, alternation did not eventuate, meaning power was not evenly shared between the opposition party and the LDP. However, LDP uses this as an opportunity to only veto the powers of the LDP. So the Westminster system was supposed to create a fair chance of opposition and government in parliament. However, in Japan, it had led to the dominance of LDP again. All right. Let's look at the selection of the Diet, or the upper house and the lower house. Okay, citizens over the voting age of 18. Okay, just like Papua New Guinea. So they vote for. So there are two electoral system. No, the voter has two votes. All right, they use what is called a single member district system and the prefectural constituency. The single member for lower house, and that single member district is implemented through what is called the proportional representation system, and it's called the mixed member system. And on the other end, the upper house is voted through the open list system. So what's the difference between a mixed member system and an open list system? And let me read. So reforms of the electoral system was a key item on the political agenda, aiming to reduce the demand for money politics. And then the open list system reform of the electoral system was the key item on the political agenda, aiming to reduce the demand for money politics. So both system tries to reduce the demand for money politics. We have an electoral system in our country, plurality electoral system, and that the electoral system, the incentives that is provided tend to not reduce but increase the issue of or demand for money politics. In Japan, they have a similar issue. So what they did, they changed the incentives of the electoral system to reduce the demand for money politics. How is this captured? No, I'll explain so I'll explain on this, the two systems, mixed member and the open list system. So briefly, a mixed member system means that you will vote for the candidate and you will vote for the political parties. So you will have two votes. All right? And the open list system also indicates that the mixed member system is a closed list system, meaning that when you go to cast your vote, okay, they won't, or you know the three preferences that you voted for. That's called a secret ballot. In an open list system, the list of candidates will be on the poster, and you will see the list of candidates. It's not in secret, but it's an open list that you will see the list of candidates and then you will vote for. Okay, so they use these two voting mechanisms to vote for the lower house and the upper house. Now, it's not impossible to have a mixed system here, and I'm proposing a mixed member system to be implemented in Papua New Guinea to reduce the money politics. But that's another discussion for another time. All right, so here. So, for example, the lower house, 465 total seats, 289 single member district seat, first past the post, winner takes all, and 176 proportional representation, 11 regional blocks, seats allocated via the D-on system based on party vote share. So, if we are going to implement this system in Papua New Guinea, I propose that now we have 118 seats, we will include 40 seats. 40 seats would be, let's say, you have let's look at Papua New Guinea. You have 118. What is 118 plus 40? 158. Okay, so we have in Papua New Guinea 158 total seats. 180 seats will be voted into the single member seats. These are electoral seats. 40 seats would be voted to the proportional seats. And these are the party seats. Now what happens is you will cast two votes. Your first votes would be for first past the post. Winner takes all of the 180 seats. And the second vote, okay? Don't get confused with the LPV. LPV, you have only one vote. Your one vote is broken down into three preferences. That's equivalent to one vote. Here you have two votes. One is you're going to vote for the electoral seats in Papua New Guinea. That means the open member seats and the provincial seats. All right? That constitute the 118 seats. However, the 176 in Japan, like that I want to propose for Papua New Guinea, the 40 seats, that is the proportional representation seat. Meaning that you will vote for the open member, whatever provincial member, and then you will vote, the second vote, you will vote for the political party that you want to be in power. All right? So that's how that is operated in Japan. 176 is proportional seat, and they vote for the LDP party or the JSP party. So my recommendation here for Papua New Guinea is that after the electoral seat, 118 electoral seat, 40 proportional seat, we will all vote for party and not, okay, an individual member of parliament. Why this is important? Because the party seats will have the same power to pass laws on the floor of parliament as the electoral seats. Now, and this is where open list comes in. You will not choose the member of parliament that will come to the proportional seat. You will not choose that. The political party will have list of candidates that you will see, ranking from 1 to 10. And then you will vote the party. If, let's say, Papua New Guinea voted for, what is Alan's new party? What is it? Yeah, Reformist Party. 40 seats. If they win 50% of the party seats, they will get 20 seats. And that 20 seats will add it onto the electoral seats. All right? So vote 50% of the vote share, seats. Anyways, that's an hypothetical situation for Papua New Guinea, and I am yet to write that proposal up. But if I do, then it will be similar to what Japan has now. And this is good because the party seats, those 40 seats, they don't have an electorate, so that means that they will not spend DSIP, PSIP on any electorate. Their sole purpose is to pass legislate law on the floor of parliament. So, this is what Japan has currently. All right, so Japan vote for the electoral seat, single member, and then they vote for the parties through the proportional representation. All right, and it becomes a little bit complicated, but here, a candidate can run for the district seats and party seats in Japan. I wouldn't encourage that for Papua New Guinea. But in Japan, a candidate, if he runs for the district seats and did not win, and if the party ranks him at the top of the party list, he has an opportunity to be elected in parliament through the party seats. So are the ranking high enough for the PR seat? Yes. If his ranking is high, then he is elected or resurrected. All right? So the idea of proportional representation. So that's how they LDP sort of maneuver themselves here. So they stand for the district seat and also party list seats. They also send in the names that those members of parliament stood for the district seat. This is important because right now the Office of the Registry of Political Party has no relevance when it comes to election. They only get the structure of the party, register of the party, and when it comes to election, they have nothing to do with the election. It is the Electoral Commission. But if we have that system now, the Office of the Registry of Political Parties would be in charge of getting the list of seats out to the public, and then they will be involved throughout the electoral process. So, so why is this mixture of electoral system important and the incentives of this electoral system important? Is so that this will give an added advantage for the members of parliament, all right, and the voters. Voters can vote for their preferred members of parliament through the district electoral system or the open member or provincial seat, and then the party seats. And members of parliament can either stand for the district and the party seats. So they have alternatives to get into parliament. When there is no alternatives to get into parliament, money politics increases. So that's how Japan tried to improve their electoral system, just to reduce money politics. Okay, let's see. Upper house, the open list, that's the same. Okay, right now I'm not going to explain about the technicalities here, but okay, so the idea is that also the proportional representation system is that no big party should get or take or winner take all for all the seats. The seats needs to be redistributed evenly throughout the election. So that means smaller parties must have an opportunity to also win seats. And that's the calculation mechanics or calculations behind the proportional representation seat. So if you look at that, two parties here, party A got 100 votes, party B got 80 votes. If they win certain amount of seats, then in the second round of calculation, it is divided by 2, meaning that they have already one seat, divided by 2 now, meaning that the other seats, okay, so they already had one, so their chances of getting another seat is reduced. So when that is reduced, the chances of other parties to get the seat increases, so it balances out. Okay, something like that. All right, so then all right. Okay, so the other issue here, malapportionment problem, what does that mean? We have an issue of rural vote becoming bigger and urban vote becoming smaller. Now in Papua New Guinea, the malapportionment problem leads to the electoral commission of the electoral boundaries declaring new electorates. So in Japan, there was a situation where there is a misbalance of population. We have, let's say, bigger population in the rural areas, not so much of electoral seats or constituency seats. You have smaller population in the urban areas, but more seats. So there is a imbalance of distribution of electoral seats, not party seats, electoral seats. So, now to address that, Japan had gone through what is called merging prefectures, okay, urban seats. Because there is a lot of small population in the urban area, Japan had to merge, all right, merge the prefectures, meaning two provinces, they become one. Let's say East and West Sepik, okay? When you merge East and West Sepik, you have, let's say, the Sepik province, okay, something like that. But this is important because if you look at Papua New Guinea, we have a very big rural population, and that gives the reason for a new electoral seats to be established. But again, in our country, a new electoral seats would mean the cost to the taxpayers and the government increases. Okay? Only if we make those new electoral seats become party seats, then the cost doesn't increase. But here, so what I'm trying to point out is that Japan has also had the same problem like we are going through now in Papua New Guinea. Bigger population calls for an extension of electorate. Okay, when a new electorate comes in, meaning that government funds and increased service delivery in, so that okay, there is balance, okay, something like that. Okay, we looked at electoral system. Now we look at how legislature and bills are passed on the floor of parliament or in the diet. So there are two phases. Okay, the first phase is here, the Eden phase here. This is during this phase. That is when, let's say, the mobilization of bills, legislature, or particular issues being discussed from outside of the diet. All right. So you have like civil society bringing, let's say, an issue on immigration to the attention of the political parties, and that political parties started to go around, debate, doing rallies, so on and so forth, meaning that it has not reached the diet yet. All right? So, the first Eden phase usually comes like the drafter. Okay? So you imagine that before you write an essay, you have to get a separate piece of paper, do draft, put your ideas out, give it to your friends. Okay? Before you do the actual paper and then you submit it. So in terms of doing this draft phase here and in politics, okay, in Japan, that is when the different ministries started to go out, getting data, getting research, or doing research about a particular issue. And most of the time, those issues tend to be, like for example, LDP, they bring this issue to the LDP attention through the Zoku policy tribe, okay, that we mentioned earlier in chapter 3. So the LDP has its own affairs or process to filter those issues up, okay, through its research council, and then it is passed through the cabinet. Cabinet meaning the executive government. And now, so for example, you do your draft, write up your paper, and then you pass it to me. Okay, that's the assignment. Pass it to me, I'll mark it, and in order for you to score a good mark, or let's say, let's look at it through the assessment. So, we are going back and forth here. I'm trying to give you information. You're trying to get the content of the assessment done. You finish all the assessment. You give that assessment to me, the 3-piece assessment. I marked it. I sorted it out. So now I am the cabinet. So I'm getting all this assessment now, and I am going through the school examiners board to get those assessments through. So I am the cabinet. Now I must go through the house committees, now the school board. All right? Now school board is an important part of this process because they would have to go through the assessment itself. They will verify the assessment and they will tell me that the assessment meets the standard, and then they will pass it in order for your assessment to appear on the transcript. Now, in politics, this is the work of the House committees, the standing committees, and the plenary session. These are various committees now that will go through the bills in Parliament. So, House Management Committee, the Cabinet brings the bills to the House Management Committee. House Management Committee will sit in Papua New Guinea. We have the Public Accounts Committee, various committees. Now, in Papua New Guinea, these committees comes to life when we enter the phase of vote of no confidence. That's where the people come to realize the importance of what is called the Public Accounts Committee, or that particular committee that deliberates on votes of no confidence. But here in Japan, House committees played an important role in terms of scrutinizing, looking at the bill, the legislation, and see if it fits to go to the next process. So after House Management Committee filters the bill, they pass it on to the Standing Committee. Now, Standing Committee will check, they do a second check. If it fits the criteria, then they pass it to the plenary session. The plenary session is when the bill is being debated on the floor of Parliament. In Papua New Guinea, we do it differently. We can pass a bill within a space of one Parliament session. And that's very dangerous because the filtration process has not taken place. Our people has not given the opportunity to at least look at the bill and give feedbacks. So we don't usually pass, in Papua New Guinea, we are supposed to be, we're supposed to take part in the process through the Eden phase, but we do not always do that in the Eden phase. All right? But this is how they pass the bill. The House Management Committee, standing committees are very important to filter those bills. So the pass rate in Japan for cabinet proposal bills, usually 90% of the bills passed. However, the Diet members' bills, usually 30%. And that's in Papua New Guinea, we call it the private members' bill. Okay, that's the same in Papua New Guinea. The cabinet proposed bill, the bill proposed by the Prime Minister is usually passed quickly. And that, well, in Papua New Guinea, the private members' bill, it depends whether you are in opposition or you're in Parliament. If you're in Parliament, then your bill tends to, the bill that you bring to the floor of Parliament, okay, there is a, let's say, over 80% success rate. All right, and budget. Okay, budget is important. For students of politics, November is our time. We have to be engaged in analyze, discussion when it comes to budget. Budget is a very important aspect of the parliamentary process. In most of the Westminster countries or representative democracies, the United States, United Kingdom, Japan, and even Papua New Guinea, we should be actively involved. Our citizens should be actively involved in budgetary process, okay, in November. Why? Because the infrastructure that we are sitting, university gets funding from the budget, okay? Your parents get some sort of funding from the budget, okay, in order to pay for your fees. Our roads and bridges, DSIP, PSIP, all gets funding from the budget. That is why budget is an important component in the parliamentary process. Okay, like Papua New Guinea, we have a lot of committees, Foreign Affairs, Justice, all these committees sits. The committees are important. Papua New Guinea, we do not, I think recently we have committees becoming involved in pressing issues of our country. So parliamentary committees are very, very important because they sort of filter and bring in important issues in our country to the floor of parliament for legislation. So the budget committee here, we have a budget committee also in Papua New Guinea. So the budget committee in Japan is the true arena for confrontation, where the PM can be questioned on any policy. So the PM, the Prime Minister's inability to pass a parliament automatically deems him unfit for office. So Parliament, Prime Minister in our country can be voted out through a vote of no confidence and through the budget session. So that is why you would see that any Prime Minister would be very much active in this process of budget. He will make sure that his government, department, agency, ministers get the budget right, because his life as a Prime Minister depends on the budgetary process. Okay, let's look at question time. Okay, question time is an important aspect of the parliamentary process. That is why when members of parliament in Papua New Guinea, when the opposition calls for extension of question time, this is important. Why democracy is functioning depends on the exchange of discussion in the parliamentary session. Why the government usually faster question time is that the question time will also expose government's inability to govern. And that's the reason why the executive government in our country tend to do not want to extend question time, because the country is watching, people are watching, and issues raised is credible, issues raised will question the legitimacy of the government. That's why any government would not want question time. And that is why when I say Kesi Sawang, the member, because she's the minister, she is always defending the Ministry of Labor and Labor, yeah. Meaning that all question will be focused to the government. And who is the government? The Executive Council and the Cabinet Ministers. So ministers are the government. So that means they are only to respond to questions and not ask questions on the floor of parliament. Okay, that is why some of your members who are ministers are quiet during question time, because they are part of the government. They are not supposed to be asking questions. They are there to answer the queries from the parliament, the legislature. That is why to save face, they tend to reduce question time. Here in Japan, from 2000, you see frequency or significance of the debate, it increased. But at the later stage of 2014, 2016, it decreased. That's an indication of, you remember when we talk about the Prime Minister's office being given prominence? So when the Prime Minister's office is given prominence, that will automatically led to the decline of frequency of the question time, okay, in Japan. So that's an indication that the Prime Minister now is in control. When the Prime Minister is in control, the executive government in control, they would want to limit question time. Okay. The other trend is that, okay, so this is the trend here. When the Prime Minister consolidates its power now, from the big government to the small government, more focused attention to the prime minister. The consequence of it is that it resulted in less question time in parliament. The bureaucracy and the Zoku tribe previously discussed in chapter 3 were not given prominence. So other industries, ministries, even civil society now were focusing on getting their issues straight to the prime minister, skipping the Zoku policy tribe. So that an example would be Prime Minister Koizumi during the privatization postal bill, and Abe centralized power in the cabinet, so that bypassed the big bureaucracy. So an indication of a small government. So the idea is to make service delivery efficient by having a small government. Okay, the other support group, Koenkai, personal support group, now having a small government, the prime minister in control, led to the decrease, okay? Cost maintenance of the support group decline, okay? Right, okay. All right, so here, public subsidy distribution. So one way of, so Japan had an issue with businesses sponsoring the support group and policy tribe to influence policies on the floor of parliament. So by 2012, Koizumi, Shinzo Abe introduced what is called a Public Subsidies Act. Okay, so public subsidies introduced to replace what is called corporate donation. So previously you have big businesses giving large sums of money to political parties. Okay, in our country, we do not know how much big businesses give to the political party, because our political parties are not visible enough for us to be asking questions about who gives to those political parties. But the problem in Japan is that big businesses tend to give large sums of money to the LDP. And when the LDP party gets these large sums of money, this feeds into the support group and Zoku policy tribe. When they receive large sums of money, the prime minister now tends to listen to these big businesses. I mean, the Zoku policy tribe and the bureaucracy. So one way of getting back the power to the prime minister's office is through cutting the funding that goes to political parties, and then introduce a law by Guilty by Association Act. Okay, that means that any candidate loses seat. Candidates will lose seat if there is an instances of, or if family or any associate that is, let's say, criminally investigated, or there is allegations. We should have this law in our country, guilty by association, meaning that if your family member is caught up in some scandal, then you should resign from office, whether it be public service or the national office. Okay, it brings disrepute to your image. If we have that, imagine how many politicians would resign from office, how many top bureaucrats would resign from office. We need to have a guilty by association law or act in parliament. Right, we have about 6 minutes. Okay, let's see. So if you read through the chapter, the issues, challenges that is found in the chapter in relation to the dynamics in the parliamentary process is the conflict between big government and small government, and the conflict between prime minister's reform all right, to make the Prime Minister's office important. Formally, the Prime Minister's office is influenced by the LDP party or whatever party, all right? And in our country also, the Prime Minister's office, James Marape, is not independent to make neutral decisions in relation to our country. James Marape is dancing to the tune of the numbers game in our country. If he wants to make a neutral decision, he needs to consult the cabinet, because it depends on the cabinet for the number to be the Prime Minister. Okay? So here again, in an effort to centralize control, the Diet, that means the bureaucracy needs to be restructured, the Diet schedule needs to be restructured, and the opposition. So the Prime Minister's office tend the machine for maximum efficiency, marginalizing Diet's role on debating chamber. Okay, so here. And that is true for Papua New Guinea. Prime Ministers, why the cabinet? So a big government is good for, let's say, the parliament. Why? Because a big government expands parliamentary negotiation and parliamentary discussion. A small government reduces the Diet's or parliament's role. A small government now focuses on the Prime Minister and his cabinet. All right? Our situation is a mixture of both. We have a very big public service, but in parliament we have a very small, let's say, attention. Okay? The Prime Minister, the executive government tends to take control in the parliament, reducing Diet's or parliament's role because of the presence of the executive government. Okay? And that's the problem with Westminster system. A Westminster system where you have the executive is fused with the legislature. When you look at presidential system, the executive is separated from the legislature. That's why you have the presidents. The president in itself is the executive. In our country, the Prime Minister and the cabinet forms the executive, and they are part of the legislature. All right. So conclusion. So the intent of the reforms after 1990s, it was supposed to create a British two-party system, but in reality, it created a LDP dominant plus fragmented opposition system. And the electoral system favors large parties, and Ko and Kai favors incumbents. So the Diet remains an arena, but the outcome is increasingly determined by the sessions begin. So the reforms after 1990s was aimed at creating a small government. And those very reforms influence the legislative process. So that's the old summary of Chapter 5. The reforms that was taking place in Chapter 4 influenced the legislature or the Japanese Diet in Chapter 5. All right? Okay. Oh, yeah. The definition of terminology. Okay, Diet or Kokai is Japan's parliament. Okay, Zoku is policy tribe. Politicians with specific industry ties. All right. Okay, Neji or twisted diet, spill control between the houses, Ko and Kai, personal support group. Okay, these are various definitions. All right, so this concludes the lecture on Chapter 5.